Well, we got the news. We all fully expected college football going to the 5+7 format, unanimously approving it as the 12-team playoff begins in 2024. But what is the big time fatal flaw when it comes to this 5+7 format? We're going to discuss that in this video. First things first, I really don't have anything against the Big 12 or the ACC or the group of five, but there is a fatal flaw, and it's just crazy to see stuff like this getting approved when it is so obviously completely ridiculous and it lacks nuance. So taking a look at this, you can see the format. The College Football Playoff Board of Managers today unanimously revised the qualifying criteria for the playoff, and this dates back to the Pac-12 dissolving completely. Originally, it was a 6+6 format where you would have all the five Power 5 conferences. When the Pac-12 existed, there were five. All of those teams would get an auto bid, the champion, and then you'd get the highest ranked group of five champion getting an auto bid, and then you would have six of the just at-large bids. That's been changed to five auto bids. So what you're getting is four of the Power 5 champions, the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, and then one group of five team, the highest ranked champion. The big issue that I have right now, I'm not going to get into the idea of just going to the 12 best teams, because inevitably, let's be honest, that's what's going to happen. I mean, these conferences are just ridiculous, but it's the idea to where with this format, they're treating all of these conferences the exact same. It totally lacks nuance. The Big Ten and the SEC are so far and away better than the ACC and the Big 12, and it's crazy because the dust has settled, and you look at the Big 12 conference without Texas and Oklahoma. Is there in terms of talent, is there a top 20 roster in that league? I don't think there is. And you're telling me one of those teams is going to be rewarded with a bye in the first round, because that's the new setup. If you win your conference, how it's very likely going to go, the top four teams are guaranteed to be one Big Ten team, because to get a bye, you have to win your conference. It's going to be one Big Ten team with a bye, one SEC team with a bye, one Big 12 team with a bye, and one ACC team with the bye, unless something crazy happens with a group of five team going undefeated and having a good schedule. They could potentially get a bye, but we would expect the group of five team to be ranked 12th, or at least the 12th seed in this potential 12-team playoff. They'll very likely be the de facto worst seed, because you have to allow a group of five team in based off of this format. The issue with this format, the fatal flaw, is treating all of these conferences equally. It doesn't make any sense. After the realignment, it's so lopsided to two conferences. And listen, if you want to say the ACC should get an auto bid, the Big 12 should get an auto bid, that's fine, but don't give them buys automatically and reward them for playing in worse conferences. This has always been an issue with college football in terms of schedule and how tough it is. I think, yes, we should let ACC and Big 12 teams, and the ACC does still have FSU. They still have Clemson. Clemson's got a ridiculously talented roster. FSU is reloading through NIL. The sticking point here is the Big 12. Like, you could say Utah, you could say maybe Arizona, but I'm just not seeing a team in the Big 12 that is sick. It's just crazy when you compare the Big 12 to the Big 10. My God, just in terms of roster talent, it's not even close. And you're going to reward a Big 12 team because they play an easier schedule, a Big 12 team with a bye, over a team like Ohio State or Oregon based on what? The fact that they're in a different conference, so they get a bye? Come on, guys. This is silly. This is dumb. And this is going to be changed within 2 years. And I would expect, because they're already coming out and saying, oh, this is probably just a 1 or a 2 year little solution. We're probably going to change it again. And even if they were to say, oh, this is indefinitely staying, we know that when conference realignment happens and the ACC inevitably loses teams, they're going to change this again. And at a certain point, they're going to say, all right, the SEC and the Big Ten are so much more powerful than every other conference in terms of revenue. We're just going to change it to the 12 best teams, and people are going to hate it because it's going to be a lot of Big Ten teams and it's going to be a lot of SEC teams. There are already people complaining and saying that, oh, after the five auto bids, it's just all going to be Big Ten and SEC teams. Yeah, basically, there might also be an ACC team, but the best teams in college football are in two conferences because of realignment. I'm not obsessed with the Big Ten. I'm not obsessed with the SEC. I never said there was this dominance with these two conferences before the realignment happened, but the realignment happened. The SEC, which was already the number one conference in college football in terms of talent, in terms of championships, they poached the two best teams from the Big 12 conference, so that made the Big 12 extremely weaker, and then the Big 10 adding their West Wing, and especially a team like Oregon. And how about Washington making the national championship, adding them as well, along with USC, who has seen a resurgence with Lincoln Riley. So these conferences are just so much more powerful than other conferences, and you can see it's just that first paragraph. It's just, there's no nuance to this new format. You can see the highest ranked conference champions, the five highest ranked conference champions. You're valuing every conference championship equally, when I think it's infinitely harder to win the Big Ten Conference Championship than it is to win the ACC or the Big 12. It's just harder, but you're valuing them with this format the exact same, and you're rewarding buys to the ACC and to the Big 12. Listen, when it comes to the idea of a group of five team, I like it personally. I know a lot of people say, no, you shouldn't have a group of five team in it. It's one of those things where, yes, the group of five team is going to upset a lot of people, because you look at a team like Liberty, you could say, well, they went undefeated. Well, they had the easiest schedule in college football by a long shot. And what we saw with Liberty in their New Year's Six game getting destroyed, horrible football, just terrible in general. Yeah, the problem is, whoever the group of five bid is, outside of like a Cincinnati type situation where Cincinnati actually did have a team that was ranked inside the top five, they're very likely going to take that de facto number 12 spot, and they're going to be on the road against a very tough 5 seed, which will likely be an Ohio State, an Oregon, a Georgia, an Alabama, a Texas. I mean, those conferences are just so strong. You can list 8 or 9 teams from those conferences that are just very impressive, but either way, I would expect them to change this format. And then take a look at this. The new college football playoff format will put the 4 highest ranked conference champions as seeds 1 through 4. That means even if Notre Dame is the number 1 ranked team in the country, they would get the number 5 seed, requiring them to win 4 straight games to win a national title. That's brutal. And yeah, I really don't think we have to worry about that with Notre Dame. Now, I think Notre Dame might make the playoff even with 2 losses, and honestly, them not being in a conference might actually help them when it comes to a 12-team format. The only way it would hurt them is, he's right, if they somehow went undefeated, because they wouldn't be a conference champion, they would have to be the 5 seed. But what he also doesn't take into account is not that they would really get a first round bye, but they very likely would be matched up in a home game against a team like Liberty or a team like Memphis, or insert random group of 5 team that makes it, because that's likely going to be the 12v5 matchup. It's going to be the 12 seed as the group of 5 team taking on Notre Dame or whoever. I think Notre Dame's probably going to make the playoff, likely as like a 10 seed or something, as the 10 seed, maybe with 2 losses. But yeah, that could be an issue for Notre Dame. That's why I think this format is going to pretty much immediately change after 1 or 2 years. I mean, think about it. They could change it next year if we get FSU leaving the ACC. That could give them enough reason to change it just anyways to just the 12 best teams in general, which people would hate, and they would say, how could you do this? You're going to leave teams out. No, you're just trying to make it fair. When you've got so much concealed talent within 2 conferences, the idea you have to treat these conferences equally just doesn't make any sense. So I do think this will be changed, and there is a fatal flaw to this format, and people are starting to sense it. They understand it. You can take a look at this. This would be the actual format, college football 12-team format in 2023. You can see Michigan getting about... Well, actually, this would not be the format because of realignment. Because Texas this is the issue. This is the exact problem. With realignment, Michigan and Washington are on the same conference, so there's no way both of those teams would get a bye. And same thing with Alabama and Texas. So there's a great example of it right there. By the way, another thing, when it comes to, I don't want to go after Fox, but it's weird to see this. It's like, if you're putting together like a hypothetical playoff, why are you having 2 SEC and 2 Big Ten teams match up again? Those are rematches. They would avoid rematches it would actually be Ohio State against Ole Miss and Georgia taking on Penn State, meaning they would move Penn State up a spot and move Ole Miss down a spot because they'd want to avoid rematches. Either way, I do think this format will be changed. They're already hinting at it, and they're saying, oh, it's just a 2-year temporary solution. I think it's a 1-year temporary solution, because think about it. This was originally enacted last year, and they've already changed it once because of realignment. They just changed it. They're probably going to change it again next year to the 12 best teams, or, and I'm open to this as well, what they could do, because I do like a group of 5 team getting into it, you have to open up the buys. You cannot give, I'm all for like, okay, if you win the ACC, depending on how many teams they lose, but if, let's just say they lose FSU and maybe Clemson, if you win the ACC, yes, we'll let 1 team in. If you win your conference, that's fine. You're not getting a bye, or you might get a bye if you go undefeated, but you have to open up the buys. You can't just automatically give buys to the Big 12 and the ACC based on how watered down these conferences are. I guess the ACC is not watered down. It's just not nearly as good as the Big 10 and the SEC, because the Big 10 and the SEC have added a ton of teams. So I would say, look, we can redo the thing. It doesn't have to be the 12 best teams. That's what I think it's going to be. But you can say we're going to open up the buys. Still, the best ACC team is going to be in guaranteed. The team that wins the ACC Conference Championship will be in. The team that wins the Big 12 Conference Championship will be in. But they might be a 10 seed. They're not going to be vaulted up to be a 4 seed just because they won their conference, when we all know the Big 10 and the SEC are far superior in terms of conference strength and schedule strength to a conference like the Big 12 or the ACC. This is all very simple, and it seems like college football, they're always a year behind fixing things, and they will likely fix this next offseason. I'm sure this is probably going to affect this season, because inevitably, when you look at the Big 10 Conference, you're looking at 2 powerhouses in Ohio State and Oregon. I mean, these are super giants, and one of them is not going to win their conference, so they're going to have to be bumped down to a 5 seed. How about Texas? How about Georgia out of the SEC? You could even say Alabama. So, you know, some of these teams are going to be very mad they're not getting a bye, and you're going to have a team like Arizona or Utah, and it's nothing against those programs. You know, they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But it's obvious there's a talent disparity there, and really a conference disparity, but they get vaulted up just because they're in a different conference that's weaker. Does that really make sense? It doesn't, and we understand this is going to be changing very likely. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.